today what I'm going to be doing is talking to you about how the plasticity of behavior is a very important consideration in choosing the particular behavioral target for a campaign to reduce CO2. All right, so there are multiple paths to any destination, and that's the premise for this talk. So today my destination was Garrison. I actually left Colorado at midnight East Coast time, so I'm a little bit sleep deprived. If I were renting a car at LaGuardia, what I would have done is gone on MapQuest and looked to see how I should go. Now, one of the great things about MapQuest is it gives me this route, but I can drag it and I can select a different route, and it'll tell me how many miles it is and how long it's going to take, so I can make a direct comparison. And if you're like me and you're a native New Yorker, then you're going to pick the one on the right because it keeps you in New York. And so sometimes, rather than going into New Jersey, sorry, hope there are any Jersey natives here. But so sometimes our decisions are based on facts like how many miles or how much distance, and sometimes it's based on irrational things. And the same thing is true for, can I have the next one? Thanks. All right. So there are lots of different behaviors that we can choose to get us to our destination of reducing CO2 emissions. So those behaviors are very diverse. They can be the ways that we work, what we eat, and when we drive and how much we drive, and also, of course, using electricity. Okay. So when it comes to choosing behavior for a behavior intervention, one of the one good resource for people is the work of Mackenzie Moore on community-based social marketing. And I'm assuming that probably a lot of you are familiar with this, but if you're not, he has his book is in the 3rd edition. It's called Fostering Sustainable Behavior. And in it, he talks about how you select the behavior that you're going to try to change in order to get you to your destination. And he talks about 3 important factors. Impact, which is how much does the behavior relate to the ultimate goal that you want to reach. The probability, which we'll call plasticity of the behavior, how malleable is it, and also penetration. So how many people are currently doing the behavior? How big is your audience of people whose behavior you can change? Now, he goes on to talk about, all right, if you're going to assess plasticity, the best way to do that is to look at campaigns that have been run before to determine how much behavior change they got. And we've seen some great examples of that in this session today. But he goes on to say if there aren't good data out there, what you can do is you can go into the community and you can ask people, how likely is it that they'll change their behavior? And he suggests that they rate that on a scale of 0 to 4. And then he says, okay, you take that plasticity and you multiply it times impact, and that gives you a method for comparing different types of behavioral targets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you today about 2 studies that we did at CSU and kind of demonstrate this process of comparing behavioral plasticity and impact to determine what would be the best target for an intervention. So both of these studies were conducted in the residence halls on the campus of CSU. They were both very simple interventions that involved putting posters up in the living areas of the residence halls. And both of them involved comparing environmental appeals to normative information campaigns. The 2 behaviors that we compared were persuading students to buy green power and getting them to reduce their wasted electricity consumption, getting them to turn stuff off when they're not using it. So very briefly, the first study was conducted in the fall of 2009. We were trying to get the students to purchase green power for $17. And for $17, they could buy the average amount of electricity that is consumed by a student in the residence halls for 1 semester. So it was 1 semester's worth of electricity for $17 for green power. The posters that we put up had the same graphic on them. They all had a wind turbine on them, but obviously the environmental appeal and the normative message just had different wording on them. In fall of 2010, we did a semester-long campaign that was aimed at reducing their wasted energy, and the slogan for it was "Flip off the Phantom." The students, I should acknowledge the students I was working with, by the way, my graduate student, Adam Zaleski, and then some great undergraduate students, Colleen Sinclair, Jill McLeod, and Zach Horowitz. And they helped me develop the slogan. Their first suggestion, oh no, don't tell me. This is a nightmare. It's the Phantom. Yeah. So I have to tell you that so when we were first developing this campaign, what we did was we were taking pictures of the students engaging in the behaviors that we wanted to get the other students to do. And what we noticed is that all of the activities were with your fingers. So it was turning off a light or turning off a power strip or something like that. And so the students said, yeah, give the Phantom the finger. It's like, oh no, please, no. Fortunately, the university didn't go for that. So we wound up with Flip Off the Phantom, which isn't as bad. But anyway, so what we did, this is the second study. These were some of the posters that we put around for 1 month. The one on the right is obviously the environmental appeal, and then the one on the left is the normative message. And as I said, this was actually a semester-long intervention. All of the messages had this same "Flip off the Phantom" slogan on them, but they differed obviously in the graphics and the messages. Okay, so what did we find? Well, okay, here we go. So in study 1, when we were comparing the environmental appeal and the norms message in terms of their effectiveness to get students to part with $17 to purchase wind power, what we found is that just about 1% of the students in the environmental appeal actually bought the wind power, and 1.61% of the students in the norms condition purchased the wind power. So it depends on if you're a glasses half empty or a glasses half full person. This graphic is the glasses half full, but if you actually graph that on a scale of 0 to 100, then of course your bars are non-existent. So, you know, on the one hand, the normative messages were more effective, but in the context of a very, very low base rate. Now, with study 2, we actually had some nice results, which unfortunately are not up there. And, but the overall effect over a 2-month period was that the residence halls who got the norms messages reduced their consumption by over 12% from the previous year. And those numbers were corrected for weather. And the students who got the environmental messages also showed a decrease of almost 3% from the previous year. Okay. So, but remember that our goal here is to look at the effects of these interventions on the CO2 emissions. So when we compare these two behavioral targets, what we see is that although it was a small effect of the normative message, effectively over the 13 dorms, we increased purchase of green power by 33 students. And that's a total of 52,800 kilowatt hours of green power that was purchased. In the second study, because of the fact that we had 9.25% additional decrease in energy use in the normative condition, that amounts to a 288,000 kilowatt hour reduction in electricity use. Now, in order to know how that translates into CO2, of course, you have to know how your electricity is generated in your particular area. So in Fort Collins, our electricity is predominantly coal generated, about 71%, 20% hydro, and that tiny little light colored slice there is our 4% renewables. The green power was 94% wind power and a little bit of other stuff. So in total, the green power intervention reduced CO2 emissions by 42.5 metric tons, whereas the electricity reduction reduced it by 232 metric tons. So clearly, there's a much bigger impact of reducing electricity consumption on CO2 emissions. And this is the result of this plasticity. But that's not the end of the story. I want to cycle back to where I started, which is with Mackenzie Moore's suggestion that if you don't have data like I've presented, what you can do is you can go into the community and you can ask people how likely they are to change their behavior. Now, as it turns out, before we did study one, we actually asked students. We brought them in, we showed them different messages, and we asked them how likely they would be to purchase green power after seeing those messages. And the mean rating was a 5 on a scale of 1 to 7. So what they told us after seeing our messages is that they were very likely to buy green power. But when we actually put the posters up and gave them the opportunity to do that, only 1.61% of the students did it. So the big picture takeaway message here is that just like Nolan and Schultz and colleagues found when they compared people's self-reported reasons for conserving energy with what actually predicted behavior, the fact is that asking people just isn't going to be enough. If we're going to deliver effective behavior change campaigns, we need data. So what that means is that you're going to have to do pilot campaigns where you take a small number of people and you try to change different types of behaviors so that you can see for yourself in your community how malleable are these different behaviors. Simply asking people what they're going to do, what their intentions are, isn't accurate. And so any campaign that you devise, whether you're a nonprofit or whether you're an academic, there has to be money there to look at a real comparison of how much plasticity there is in the behaviors that you're thinking about including in your behavior change campaign. Thank you.